study. We began Lent last Wednesday night with our Ash Wednesday service, and tonight we begin 6 sessions on Lenten study on Jesus' last. Tonight we will look at Jesus' last teaching in John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. I think we'll all recognize it really well, but I'll read that in a few moments. Right now I want to give an overview. Those who are in attendance have the overview, the introduction in your hand, or I hope you do. And then tonight will be interactive. So what I'll do is before I read that, I will read over the questions. I don't know did y'all do that on test? When you take a test in class, you would read the questions first, so you'd get, especially if it was like a comprehensive thing, like the SAT, when you would have the reading comprehensive, you would read the questions first, and then nobody did that. Just really? Ann did. So Don, yeah. Anybody else? So there's just 3 of us that have any sort of intellect at all. Exactly. It's getting harder and harder. I can assure you. Okay, so we're looking at Jesus when he washes his disciples' feet. I was reading up on this earlier in the week, and one commentator brought out the first point that I'm going to make, and it is at the moment when Jesus was heading into his suffering or his humiliation, and then towards his glory, which is resurrection, he chose humble service over pride. One of the things, and I'd heard that before, but I was not thinking along those lines, and I don't know if it's fair to say I forgot it, but I guess I did, because I don't know that I would have recalled it, is a lot of times people talk about Jesus on the cross as his suffering, because that's what he physically and there is indication spiritually did too. But I think sometimes we forget it was also humiliating, because that was the worst of the worst. You know, to the worst type of punishment, the worst sentence one could be given was death by cross. So it was humiliating. So if we believe Jesus was both human and fully divine, then there was a side of him, if that's the way to speak of it, that was humiliated to hang up on the cross. So anyway, as he went towards those things, as we'll see tonight, he chooses service, and of course the ultimate act of service was when he went up on the cross, but he chooses service over his own benefit and his own pride. One of the things to keep in mind while we're reading and talking about and discussing him washing the feet is his disciples sat at the feet of him as a rabbi. So, and I don't think we oftentimes, or I'll put the burden here, I guess, I don't think we oftentimes consider that, because there was you as a student, you sat under the tutelage, under the direction of a rabbi. So you, as I'm indicating in the notes, what that rabbi, I guess the best way to put that was how that rabbi was known, and the acts of service that rabbi was known for. You as a disciple would be charged to serve that out or live that out. So in other words, when Jesus washes his disciples' feet, one of the things that the scriptural passage would not indicate to us, but that they would know as students sitting under Jesus, he's letting them know some things, a thing that they need to do as students of him. Does that make sense? That they would then be charged with that act of service because they sat underneath Rabbi Jesus. Okay. There's a story, and I came across this, I guess, about a week or so ago when I started thinking along these lines. A story of St. Francis. When you hear story, probably should be capitalized, because another way to talk of that would be the legend of St. Francis. So we don't know that it's totally true, but it's been handed down. So one of the things that we know about St. Francis of Assisi was he was wealthy. He was an aristocrat. He was well-to-do before he went the vow of poverty, so to speak, and went the route that he did. And the story goes that one day he was riding along on a horse by himself, and he came upon a leper. And St. Francis, aristocrat, would have, probably giddy-upped into a gallop. All right. But what had been happening in St. Francis' life is he wasn't fulfilled. The money, the wealth, all the things that he knew, it just didn't fill him. It just didn't satisfy him. So he made the decision, as the story goes, let's put it that way, he made the decision to stop and to see the needs of this leper. Now, in his day, like in biblical days, lepers were thought of as what? Unclean. What else? Social outcast, absolutely. So someone of St. Francis, well, let's say Francis, because he wasn't saint at that point. So someone of Francis' means would never have affiliated, associated, stopped to help a leper because they were thought to be social outcasts. And in thinking to be unclean, now this is going back to biblical times, to touch one was to make yourself unclean as well. Okay. So as the story goes, again, what the guy needed, come to find out, was just some compassion. So St. Francis gets off the horse and basically wraps his arms around and hugs this guy. And here's where the legend is. But legend has it that the gentleman he was hugging turned into Jesus. Now, if this really happened, I think that what St. Francis realized was what we read in Matthew 25. And that is, inasmuch as you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. Jesus makes it clear in his Gospels that when we come upon somebody, how we treat that person, be it a social outcast, however it is, that's how you're treating him. Okay. So anyway, one of the things, I bring that up because that's someone of means that decided to, instead of doing what would be socially acceptable and right on by, decided to serve humbly. And that's what Jesus is doing. Jesus today, in our passage for today, is deciding to serve humbly. Okay? And I think we can discern from Jesus' teachings that the nearer we are to someone suffering and reaching out humbly to them and serving them in the suffering, the nearer we are to God. And that's what Jesus is showing in this passage today. How to humbly serve and how to meet the needs of others. A few other things before I'll read it. To better understand this passage of Scripture is to also read into a similar account in Luke's Gospel. Because this was going on when Jesus then washes the feet. And it's Luke 22:24, if you want to turn. I'll go ahead and just read it. And we'll know what's going on. So at 24, we read these words. A dispute also arose among them as to which of them was considered to be the greatest. So the disciples are walking along. Another account gives it to be James and John, right? And they're walking along, and they're arguing. And that other account has Jesus turn around, and he actually asks them, hey, what are you guys talking about? Whether he knew or not, who knows? But he says, hey, what are you guys talking about? Well, they're embarrassed, but then they finally fess up, and then they ask. And then, of course, another account along those lines has Mama ask, too. Now, that's not during this particular time, but that's earlier, I believe, in John's Gospel. But anyway, so all that to say, pit them wanting to be the greatest with then what happens at Passover with Jesus and his disciples. See, those two disciples wanted to be the greatest in what our world says is the greatest. You sit by the rabbi, you sit by the teacher, you hang out with not the social outcast, but the socially elite. And what Jesus lets us know is, and he says it in his Gospels, is The greatest isn't what the world says. The greatest is those who do what? Y'all are whispering it. Thank you. Let's get in. We're going to interact tonight, so you might as well get used to it. No. So it's service. Lastly, again, and then we'll read the questions, and then I'll read the passage. I find at least two meanings within this story. One is truly a very dramatic lesson on on serving with humility, okay? Because that's what Jesus does. The next has to do with Jesus' interaction with Peter, and we'll read it in a moment, but you'll probably remember Peter says what when Jesus tries to wash all their feet? Not going to happen. You're not washing my feet, Rabbi. You're not washing my feet, Lord. That's not the way this is supposed to happen, okay? And then Jesus makes a statement, okay? And again, we'll read it in a moment, but Jesus' statement lets him know that that what he's doing is more than just cleaning his feet. And basically, Peter then says what? Wash me from head to toe. Okay. But then Jesus also says, no, for those who are already clean, all they need is their feet, right? So we'll expound on that perhaps in a few moments. So let's read the questions, because I want you to be thinking along these lines when I then read the passage. So the first question was going to be, what word or phrase stands out or stood out most to you in this passage of Scripture? That's when I read it. The second is, what is the setting, the time and place of this passage? Third, what are the relational dynamics of this moment? I've just mentioned one. And then giving you some hints. What are the interactions? What are the emotions of the disciples and Jesus? Fourth, John prefaces his account of Jesus' foot washing with the words, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved to the end. And the question is going to be, how is Jesus' lesson on foot washing a way of showing love? 5, what modern day equivalents do we have of foot washing? And then you have some closing questions. What impact do you think Jesus' foot washing lesson has on his disciples moving forward? And what impact does it have on us? Okay. So let's make our way to John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. Verse 1. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all these things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer garment, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? And Jesus said, you do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand. No, said Peter, you shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then, Lord, Simon Peter replied, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. Jesus answered, those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Okay. So, what jumped out? That first one, what word, phrase, or just what jumped out at you as you hear this passage of Scripture being read? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that Judas was there as well, and yeah, knowing what was going to happen, he still knelt and served. Yep. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Others, what jumped out? What word or phrase? Do I need to remind you that I was in counseling for 10 years and silence bothers me none? It's therapeutic. I will wake you up if I see you nodding too much, but okay, that he loved him till the end, to the end. Yep. Okay. What else? Anything else jump out? What would you have done? I mean, we have what Peter said, but what would you have done? What do you think? I mean, I know the initial thing is, well, I don't know. Peter didn't. So what would you have done? I don't want to sway you. Okay, so let me wash yours first. All right. What else? What do you think you would have done? Okay, so hesitant, wondering why, but go ahead with it. Okay, yeah, he's not the one supposed to be doing these things, or so we would think. Yeah, okay. What else? Okay, so you weak people would have cried. For those on the live stream, I do as well, so don't think I'm being mean. Yeah, absolutely. What else? So I don't know if you notice our altar, but within the bowl is a towel, right? And that's intentional. But this is a towel that was given to me. I went on a pastor's retreat when I was at my prior church, so that's been 35, 40 years ago now. But we went on a pastor's retreat led by our director of missions, and he had brought in a friend of his who was a pastor in, I think, Wilmington or somewhere down Wrightsville Beach, I think. But anyway, somewhere down on the coast of North Carolina. And the very last night, he brought out a basin and was going to wash our feet. And it was interesting because the dynamics were similar to this in a way, because one of the all of us were, doing as he was telling us to do. We're taking our shoes off. We were going to let him do it. Some of us didn't feel real comfortable, but we were kind of, going with the flow. And one pastor who was a Vietnam veteran and suffered from PTSD and was very vocal, shared with that, but had not shared that particular retreat. But those of us who knew him knew his history. He declined. And of course, everybody's like, you got to go along, you got to. But he looked at the pastor, and he said, "You don't know me well enough." And I'm like, wow. And then you think about it, washing somebody's feet or touching somebody's feet is one, very intimate. Who likes to touch other people's feet? Raise your hands high, raise both hands, get them up. Come on now. Yeah. Not many of us, right? But to do it, to do that is a very intimate thing. And dawned on a lot, I think everybody there, how, again, the dynamics, because Peter, said, not mine, not for the same reasons. He felt like he should wash Jesus. But anyway, and then that brought the discussion of the intimacy of it and how this setting, and how to serve people humbly is to get to know people, right? I mean, to truly serve people. Now, there are occasions where you might see somebody, as supposedly Francis did, and it's a one-time thing, and we've probably all been around that, right? You've come up to a intersection and somebody's standing there and they want money. You got a decision to make. What are you going to do? All those things. So that's a one-time thing. But for the most part, to humbly serve people is to get to know them and to know their needs. So the guy said, I'll let you wash my feet if you'll listen to my story. And then he shared his story. And then the pastor washed his feet. So anyway, that leads me to another question, because some of us, how many of us, you can just think about it, but you can participate too. How many of us would have just kind of gone along, we think, gone along with it, but been kind of uncomfortable, but because everybody else was doing it, would have still done that? How many of you think you would? Okay, so one, okay, yeah. So what are other areas in our life that we've done that? Do we ever do that in worship when we don't feel like particularly? Or other, outside of these four walls, are there other areas that we kind of just go along because everybody's doing it and that's what they're saying and all those things? So we should go down to the pit and we should tell the youth that peer pressure doesn't end when they graduate. Is that right? So it's all the way up through, however, whatever age we are. We all feel it. And I think sometimes I think a lot of times when that happens, we miss out on, think of the lesson that Peter and the other disciples would have missed out on if Peter had just gone along with the flow and not expressed. And see, God's big enough for that expression, right? Jesus answered him. And some of us would probably have sat in however they were sitting and been aghast that Peter was, Peter, this is Rabbi Jesus. This is the Lord we've been following. You got to do what he says. But yet, because of the questions that he had, or the saying no, we get a teaching, a further teaching, a more in-depth teaching. Not unlike Thomas, right? Think of the things that we might not have gotten if Thomas hadn't been the questioner. Let's forget the doubter. Let's call him the questioner. Okay. All right. Any others on something that stood out, a phrase or a word? Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, like towards the end, what I'm hearing you say is like towards the end, they think they know what it's going to be like, but they don't. And in fact, they're probably still questioning, how this thing's playing out within the next few days. And I think you're right in that he's saying, after I'm gone, between the lines, here's the way you're to serve. And so much so that you're going to be asked to serve in ways that you're not going to want to serve. I mean, none of us raised our hand on the feet thing. So in his teaching them, he did one of the most intimate things you can do and one of the things that we probably wanted to do least. Yeah, absolutely. Good. Okay, what's the setting, time, and place of this passage? It's just before Passover festival. Okay? So what's going on? What's Passover? Yeah, when the angel of the Lord passed over, right? Okay. And they've been celebrating it ever since. Lots of people are in Jerusalem. It's packed. I mean, that's the indication with that. Okay, so it's during Passover. It's during one of, if not the holiest time of the year for God's people. Okay, so think of that, and they're all gathered to celebrate, to worship, to observe. We won't go into detail due to time of all the stuff in Passover and things like that, but they're all there to praise and to worship and to celebrate and to remember. And it's there that Jesus said, as you move forward, as a student of me, your rabbi, this is how I want you to be, and these are the things I want you to do. And I'm fairly certain that some of us, and us being Christendom, have forgotten that the way this thing's supposed to work is that we humbly serve the people God puts in front of us. And that's how the message is supposed to be, or is supposed to continue. Let's put it that way. All right, what are some of the relational dynamics of this moment? What are some of the interactions? What do you think some of the emotions are, or what do we hear some of the emotions are? What do you think? What do you think Judas was thinking? He's uncomfortable, okay? Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. Absolutely. I mean, what do you think his thoughts were as Jesus kneeled? He had the towel around the waist, and as Jesus starts to wash his feet. I'm asking your opinion, so it doesn't. Guilty, okay, guilty. What else? What else you think? Or any other thoughts? Shocked, okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, I think so too. Yeah, everybody was, for as we've indicated, for a variety of reasons. So one, before he said anything, the wheels would have already started turning. He's going to expect us to do this because he's our rabbi, because he's our teacher. I think shocked too because of the level of intimacy. I think shocked too because of what Peter said, What else? What other dynamics? What other relational dynamics? No, it doesn't. It doesn't indicate that they had any knowledge. Right? Yeah, confusion. Right. Who's not clean? Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Well, sure they were. I mean, not me, but if God were to come in here today and say, some of you aren't clean, y'all would be looking out of the corner of your eye. Because it'd be anybody but who? Exactly. It'd be anybody, honestly, it'd be anybody but us. If someone said, well, there's some people in here who are unclean, we're thinking, who is it? Who is it? And what might not, now I shouldn't broad brush it and be that stereotypical or whatever the word may be. There might be somebody to think, is it me? But a lot of times what we do is we project and think, I wonder who it is, without thinking, I wonder if it's me. All right? Other things, other relational things that might have been going on. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. True. Yeah. And one of the thoughts, and you help jog my memory there, Donna, is so when people went in a house, this was a normal thing to do, right? Okay, so washing the feet was not and a lot of times the servants did that. Okay, and if someone wasn't there to do that, then someone had to, kind of take the ball or whatever and run with it and make sure it was done. Okay, so that's one of the things Jesus is doing. And we've all heard and can certainly imagine it was done for a reason, right? Because if it was raining outside, they came in how? Yeah, muddy, mucky, right? To where they'd have, if it wasn't raining outside, they came in how? Dusty. So I don't want to touch anybody's feet in here, but we're all wearing shoes, right? But I sure don't want to touch your feet if you've been walking in mud or dirt, right? I mean, but that was part of the dynamics back then as well. So I think all that we've said is part of it. Other things, any other relational? Yeah. Yeah. Right. And do we see that? I mean, I know we do see that, but I think that yeah. Yes, Donna. Sorry. Yeah. Right. Yep. Right. Convinced that he was right. You're right. That's that's absolutely a good point. A great point, actually. Yeah. So if you didn't hear, one of the things that was Judas was, we sometimes we think Judas is this weak, whatever, that he caved and he was looking for the money and all that. But I think what Donna says is very true. Is Judas, the Messiah that he found Jesus to be, was not who he thought the Messiah was to be, and he was still looking for that political, that strong warrior, Messiah, strong warrior leader. And you're right. I think that I can see that when he bent down, it was like confirmation. This guy's not, And if you've watched The Chosen, they kind of play that out in that Judas was hoping Jesus would change, and that he would become now that's extra, but that he would become the political, the governmental, the warrior Messiah, and force his hand in that. So anyway, yeah, that's very interesting. That when he knelt, a thought could have been, "Wow, this guy's even further than away from who I thought he should be to begin with." Okay, good. So John prefaces on the back of the sheet of his account of Jesus' foot washing, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. How is Jesus' lesson on foot washing a way of showing love? What do you think? Humility, okay, being humble, all right. How else? What does it do for us when instead of favored status, we think servant status? Does that make sense? So instead of thinking that we as Christians should be favored, that we as Christians are actually, by Jesus' example, put on this earth to serve. So how does that, or does that? Maybe it doesn't play in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. No, it's not. You're right. Very much. So how did he show us, and I absolutely agree, how is this lesson a way of showing love? Mm. Wow. Right. Right. That's right. Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and Sunday, what is it that you love, you know, those who you love or that you, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In Jesus' words, even the pagans do that, right? I mean, everybody loves the lovable. Everybody loves their family. Well, most of their family, and I'm just kidding. Things like that. But the real litmus test, the real test is: do you love your enemy? Are you willing to serve? Are you willing to serve Judas along with Peter? You know, yeah, absolutely, yeah, I think so, Doris. Yeah, yeah, and he's showing this to, for the most part, not a group of people who were favored status and felt like they had been their entire lives, and Jesus saying, "This is not who we are." Okay, good. Other ways that Jesus showed, or other thoughts on that Jesus' lesson on foot washing is a way of showing love. Those are very good points. Okay. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Right. Yep. Right. Mm. Yeah. Right. Right. Mm. Wow. Mm. Right. Sure. Right. Mm. Yeah. No. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. Mm. Yeah. Loving. Yeah. There's no, while he's got you here, there's no expiration date on how long we're to love. Is what I hear you. Is what I hear you saying. Yeah. And that Jesus, as this question asked, that Jesus emulated that to them. As long as he was here on this earth, he was going to serve them. He was going to show them. When you're talking about your grandmother and the toenails, you want to see family members scatter. Get my mother and my grandmother. Let them bare their feet and need clipping, and suggest someone needs to do that. Oh, I need to go do this. Oh, I forget. I'm supposed to, you know. I mean, it's yeah, right, right. Yeah, no, and I am too. I mean, the honesty is absolutely. Y'all are laughing, but you're laughing because you're thinking the same thing, or some of you are. It's a special person that will that will tend to someone's feet in that way, especially when the feet are less than desirable, less cared for. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Yeah, very good. What are modern day equivalents of foot washing? Ways that we can get involved in the messiness of life with other people. What are some modern day equivalents? Okay, good. Yep. 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 That's right. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, all the fallen human side. There's got to be, when speaking of the food bank, there's got to be times that as you're working it, and we've got a few in the room that work it, that you look out and see that line, and you're like, you know, we're going to be here a little longer today. Or you know, Monday nights, some nights I leave here, and you know, they're lined up to the end of the sidewalk after having already served them, you know, from 10 to 2, you know, during the day. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, the food banks and those types of things. Other ways, are there other modern day equivalents? Think of that. I've given you a quote here from a book by Mark Buchanan, Your God is Too Safe. And the quote, I'll just read it for those especially watching. The deeper difference between Jesus' ethic and that of the Pharisees was this. The Pharisees had an ethic of avoidance, and Jesus had an ethic of involvement. The Pharisees' question was not, how can I glorify God? It was, how can I avoid bringing disgrace to God? This degenerated into a concern not with God, but with self, with image, reputation, procedure. They didn't ask, how can I make others clean? They asked, how can I keep myself from getting dirty? They didn't seek to rescue sinners, only to avoid sinning. Jesus, in sharp contrast, got involved. He sought always and in all ways to help, to heal, to save, and to restore. And I think sometimes that we as Christians cross that line over into what the Pharisees think. You know, how is this going to affect me? How am I not to sin? How am I not to, those types of things, instead of reaching out to others. Are there other modern day equivalents, ways that we can get involved in the messiness of life with other people? Because I think, Doris, that's, for the most part, what I've heard you say is, Jesus is telling them as he bends down, and whether it was raining that night or dusty that night, saying how you're moving forward and how you're going to continue to be my disciple, continue to be my student, is going to be messy. It's not this hands off. It's not this, you know, I'm not getting involved in people's lives. It's actually the opposite. It's that, you know, is that if you're going to serve me, you're going to get down and dirty, because he got down and dirty. Yeah. Okay, good. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, Brett, just talking about the mold and mildew remover you learned. Didn't you say that was up in North Carolina? I bet they still sell that stuff by the case. But you know, when y'all went and worked with Samaritan, was it Samaritan's First then, or the Wilmington group? Okay, so, but anyway, yeah, so, you know, you go up there, and then the other thing, too, and Doris, I think that's part of the messiness, is be prepared to change. You know, if you've ever gone on a mission trip, and have you ever heard somebody stand up before you, what's the number one rule of mission trips? Be flexible. and have you ever been on a mission trip when someone wasn't? I don't want names, I don't want anything else, but it is not a fun thing for them, but it's also miserable for the people that have to hear them. You know, go home, right? But I mean, it's like, you know, you got to be flexible, because you're going to walk into a situation and you may be thinking, I'm doing this thing, and guess what? That's not what they need. But I think what Jesus is telling the disciples, showing the disciples, is that's not just mission trips. Or maybe the better way to look at it is when we walk out of here, we're on a mission trip. Because who knows what might come our way tomorrow morning. But we got to be willing to be flexible with it as God's servants. Okay. So lastly, what impact do you think Jesus' foot washing lesson has on disciples moving forward? Both them, his disciples, and us as his disciples. Okay, so we have a hard time still. I mean, as Donna was talking, a challenge for me and a challenge I think for every Christian is to think, where do I fit? Am I more Judas? Am I still expecting the political, the warrior, the that type of Messiah? Am I more Peter? Or am I fitting somewhere in with all of them, right? So I think so. I think that one of the things that should stay with us is this is not an easy task that we're called to. It indeed can get messy, and we're still supposed to serve in the way Jesus left and showed his disciples. Okay. Comments or questions? Okay, well, this is first of 6, so hopefully you glean something as we move forward with these lasts of Jesus. Let's go to God in prayer. Lord, we again for your presence here. I do pray that each has learned in the way that you have had planned. God, help us to continue to strive to live as you did by the example that you gave, and help us always to do so in your holy name. Amen.